Right. How
Yeah, I
is your
attacked by
hair?
spider webs earlier today, so I had an issue.
Okay. I've had that a lot lately. A lot more than I'd like to admit. Anyways, shall we get going?
All right, start it up.
Start it up. All right. Welcome to LinuxInstall.net, episode number 128. We are recording on Tuesday, September 30th, 2014. My name is Brian Wagner. With me, as always, is now my more faithful co-host, Mr. Walt Jevack.
All right,
How you doing, Walt?
I'm doing good. It's weird because it's Monday.
I know. I have to do this because I'm traveling a lot lately. Hey, my little lower third's not working.
Yeah, I see that.
Oh, there it goes.
Yeah,
All
we
right.
we missed your presence last week.
Yes. Yes. Did you guys record last week?
No,
Okay.
uh, neither of us really had anything to
Important
talk
to say.
about. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's wrapping up the weather here, getting trying to get in all the outside projects done, so not a whole lot of computer work in the spare time.
Yep. Yeah, I
That will
spent all.
change though in about 4 weeks.
I said, yeah, really. I don't even know if it's going to take that long. Um, yeah, I spent most of my weekend doing yard work, and I got to go see a Cleveland Indians game, which I haven't been to see an Indians game in forever. And luckily, they won.
Nice.
It's a nice way to end the season, even though they're not going to the playoffs. But yeah, they won,
Yeah.
so it was good. It's a very empty stadium, but it was good. What else? So you haven't really done much still this week with Linux, or?
I am still compiling OpenBSD stuff, learning a little bit more about the ARM architecture,
Yeah.
the what's supported, what isn't, is becoming a little more disappointing. Um, Not so much that it couldn't be or that it is that um, it physically can't be done, but just that because of the um, level of or number of people who would actually want to use it, whatever it is, nobody's doing the work. So, but yeah, I got some cool stuff running. I got DOSBox up, so I can play some old DOS games. And actually, right now, Numeric is compiling, so I'll have my spreadsheet program, which I use for a lot of stuff. I finally got dbus to compile. It was kind of interesting. I don't know if it's accurate or not, but I kept getting XML parsing errors when it was trying to compile, and rebooting the system seemed to fix that. So it would
That's
compile so
interesting.
far. Yeah, it would get some sort of error, usually string too long, and then the error would be all those fancy characters where it's not text. It's just like shapes and symbols and stuff.
Mhm.
And if I would try to immediately recompile, it would fail at the exact same spot. But if I would reboot and then try to recompile, it'd actually finish. So I don't
Hmm.
know if it's running out of memory or because of the way that the porting system recursively builds stuff. If it just at some point in time overstacks because it had to go back too many times for the operating system that's on there or what it is. But I've been able to get two or three things done by rebooting before continuing. So that was cool.
So you're saying basically on the small ARM chips, just like on Windows, rebooting fixes most problems.
So far, yes, yes, that is accurate.
I see.
So, as we were talking, I'm hoping to upgrade my ARM arsenal this evening. I'm watching an eBay uh, sale here, so we'll see how that goes.
Yes. People will get live updates as we're recording if Walt wins the bid.
Yeah, if you suddenly see me rage out, then I didn't win.
I see. I see.
But other than that, yeah, not a whole lot of playtime at work. Work's been busy again for some reason, and been doing other stuff at home. So,
Yes.
how about you?
How about me? I have been playing with RDO, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. Otherwise, Linux-wise, I I got a patch and lost wireless. and
Yeah.
I don't know why. Well, I have a suspicion why now, because I go back and I look through and everything seems to be finding it fine. It finds the card. If I do an LSPCI, I see the card. I don't see a UW UUID, which is what Network Manager wants. And so, um, when we were sitting there, when I was sitting there doing that stuff, uh, I'm trying to figure out now, how do I create a UUID for it, or how do I make it see the UUID for that? And guess what? Joe's pinging me now.
Yeah.
So, um, anyways, so that's what I've been fighting with. Everything else works fine. Can't tell anything else. I didn't even know that it wasn't working until I tried to go watch a movie with my son and play on my computer and couldn't do wireless. I was like, great. Now I got to figure out which one of the patches that I've done recently was the one that made it go bad.
Yep. Yeah, like I think I was saying, there's one of them I know they updated some firmware, so that's the first thing I'd check.
Yeah. And then there's been a huge rash of things. I mean, that's pretty much all I've done. I haven't really done much else. That and reading up on ShellShock, the wonderful bash problem that doesn't, I don't know. It says it's a problem, but I'm not sure. Some of it's functioning as expected or as designed. It's very weird. So let's move in. Let's talk about ShellShock here.
All right.
ShellShock, for those people who aren't aware, and gosh, I hope you're aware by now, but who aren't aware, ShellShock is a bash bug. We'll call it a bug because I guess that's what it is. That basically allows you to use a traditional semicolon statement. So if you define a function, do a semicolon, and then you can have it execute a command. That's all fine and well if you're doing it from the command line, but this is done when you are using environment variables. And so when I've got an environment variable set that is a function, semicolon, some command, if I call that, it'll actually execute the function and the command, which could be really bad. The very nice features that I've seen are pings, and you could imagine you can run any command. And as long as the user that's calling the environment variable has access, they'll be able to do it. So, for instance, the one that worries me is DHCP, because if I set a variable in DHCP that could do this, DHCP would be set by root, and those variables would be set by root. So DHCP would have root's access, which could be very troublesome.
Yes.
The other one that everybody's really concerned about is Apache. I'm much less concerned about that. Yes, I could pass Apache those commands. I would have to know that there was that bash was enabled. So you would have to enable the CGI mod CGI, which if you're running PHP or Java for the application server, or for that matter for Python or Ruby, you're not going to use mod CGI. You're going to use one of the other interfaces that connects directly to those. So how many people are really running bash as an interpreter on the backside? It appeared that there were quite a few, tens of thousands.
A lot of legacy systems.
Yeah. And I know that some people have commented that the routers that we all use tend to use bash as the interpreter for the requests and stuff that you do. So instead of using Python or Perl or something else, they're just using bash to update, well, probably bash instead to update stuff. Now, on those routers, though, and this is the other thing that's why people should question whether or not they need to be concerned, they're not using bash, they're using BusyBox.
Correct.
For the most part. So if you're using BusyBox, you're not affected by this, at least not that anybody can tell. There was a hurried, let's all run and double check that BusyBox doesn't have the same problem. You really need to have something more akin to a full server running the OS. But there's tons of them out there, so there's plenty of them there. I think the most dangerous thing that this could be used for would be a distributed denial of service attack. Because if I can find a list of servers that will accept these commands or accept these variables and run commands, I could easily ping flood a target, and without much trouble overrun somebody with a distributed denial of service attack and make it relatively hard to counteract. Not impossible though, but those are the most dangerous things. The reason why I'm mildly concerned, but not ready to pull ready to go screaming with my hair on fire on the DHCP thing is, you would have to take over my DHCP server or somebody's DHCP server to be able to do that. So it could be more something that you should worry about in a place where you can get open, free access to it. Like, if you're stopping at Panera and you're going to use the Panera Wi-Fi, okay, that might be something you should be concerned about.
Yeah, but there's a lot of things you need to be concerned about when you do open Wi-Fi.
There you go. That's my other thing. Like, there's 100 ways you could be really abused in an open Wi-Fi situation that you're pretty much accepting before you do it.
Yep.
So maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Because Darren Kitchen on Hack5 has shown repeatedly that he can fake people into connecting to his Wi-Fi Pineapple in the middle, and he does it all the time, and nobody notices. Like, he'll have 15, 20 people connected. They don't notice. Then he disconnects, and they all reconnect to the Wi-Fi they were supposed to connect to in the first place.
Yep.
But too bad for them. He's captured, or could have. I don't think he actually does, but he could have actually captured all their data. That we're using secured protocols and stuff like that. So I don't know. So did I explain ShellShock?
Yeah, that's good. I didn't really read up a whole lot on it because it was like one day of, oh my gosh, this is going to be the end of the world, and then the next day patches were all around, and all I got was a little of the grief from the Windows guys going, you Linux guys aren't so secure after all.
Well, and here's the counter to that. It's like, well, some of this, and this is what they were arguing about. So there were, depending on which OS, not OS, but which distribution, there were up to 4 different patches for this. And the last couple of patches were actual debates in the community. If you go read the discussion about whether or not this is a bug or a feature, it's hard to say that this isn't a feature. And that's part of the problem with fixing it is they're going to fix this, but what are they going to break when they fix it? Because people saw it as a feature and used it as a feature for years, and now all of a sudden everybody's saying, well, that's not a feature, that's a bug. It's like, well, but we've always been able to do this, and now...
Right.
Why is it now all of a sudden a problem?
Which is actually, that's a good question. If this is something that's existed forever, why is it now making an impact?
I think it's just because people noticed. Just like, and I'm wondering how many more. I think Heartbleed caused a bunch of security companies to go, hey, you know what? Why don't we go review other open source code? And they're starting with big stuff like Bash, which is on Linux, it's on Mac OS, on a whole bunch of other stuff. And the Windows guys can laugh at you all they want, but you can put Bash onto Windows and make it just as insecure.
Yep.
And even Apache could make. There's nothing saying that the same problem doesn't exist with IIS and PowerShell, because PowerShell does very similar things. You can define functions inside of variables and all that good stuff. So it may be a problem inside of PowerShell too, and because we can't see the source code, we don't know.
Right.
Now I'm sure people have been trying that just to see if that feature exists on the Windows side too, and if it does, it'll come out shortly. But this was known for a couple of weeks, and that's why, before it was made widely public, and that's why you saw all the patches as quickly as you did, and everybody was running around patching stuff. I thought the better solution really was to tell people to just configure Apache properly and not allow Apache to run Bash, period.
Right.
There's no reason for it to run Bash. Um, and there's other things, there's been discussion too. They're like, well, PHP has an exec function. If you know how to call it, you have to have code there to call it. But if you knew somebody was calling it based on a variable coming in, you could do exactly the same thing, if not worse. But again, Apache hasn't run as root for years.
Right. And the bad thing about that, I think the bad thing about that too is that depending upon the distro it's actually installed differently. The default file paths, the name of the daemon running in the background. It's not necessarily universal, so it'd be kind of hard to patch something. Like each distro, I guess, would be in charge of having to do their own patch. You couldn't just Apache wouldn't be able to patch it and then push it down.
No, they wouldn't necessarily, and it would break other things.
Then that too, right? Like we were talking before, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you should probably use WSGI instead of mod CGI because it does a much better job of isolating variables and things like that, stuff coming in. It does better filtering. Not to say that there aren't holes there too. I'm sure there's plenty of holes there too. But most of it is you should secure your systems. And if you secure your systems, then you should be fine. With the exception of DHCP, which you can't really secure unless you patch. But every distro I've seen has patched it already, so it shouldn't be a problem.
Right.
If you've gone out and patched, you should be fine.
Yeah.
Now, for corporate situations, that may or may not be an option. You'd have to do your investigation. They'll take a little bit longer to do it. At the same time, corporate systems aren't going to be running DHCP, and probably shouldn't be running mod CGI. So they're going to be mostly secure anyways.
True.
So be careful, be intelligent, don't turn on anything you don't need. That's kind of the hard, fast rule. And Apache actually has been, the last couple of new releases of Apache, they've gone to a more comment everything out stance and then rely on you as the person installing it to have to know to go uncomment it so it's actually active. So it doesn't load the modules. It used to load practically every module by default. There's a couple problems with that. One is memory consumption, and if I don't need it, I shouldn't run it because I need the memory. The other one is, like we're talking about now with this bash problem, if you weren't running mod CGI, then you wouldn't be able to, somebody wouldn't be able to exploit it.
Right.
And even then, you need other parameters. You can't it's not just a matter of turning on mod CGI. Having tried to get things to work. It's not as easy as it sounds, or it should be sometimes. So, shall we move on?
Sure.
Well, you wanted to talk about switching Debian's decision to switch desktops again.
I did, but I need 32 seconds.
Oh, because in 32 seconds you're
possibly getting me a new gadget. That's correct. Eight, seven, six, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And it's mine. Woo! All right.
Cool. So Walt has a new toy, which he'll show us whenever he gets it.
Yes, I will. It is a Linux. Yes. Close that window. That worked out good. All right, so.
So, anyways,
maybe I'll be running Debian now. Who knows?
Uh-oh. So Debian was shipping XFCE by default.
Yeah, last year there was a huge controversy, uproar, argument, whatever you want to call it, because Debian decided to switch from Gnome as their default desktop to XFCE, and gave various reasons. honestly don't remember what most of those were, but as a XFCE fan, that was fine by me. Didn't really matter too much. So I guess there was enough discussion where they decided to open the polls and re-qualify what should be the main distribution's desktop. And they decided to go back to GNOME. So this time around, though, they actually posted the asked or based their decision on, and I put the link to that in the show notes, or Brian will have the link to that in the show notes. But two of the main things actually that I found really interesting that for whatever reason Debian thought was super important is XFCE's accessibility features are still a little lacking, but more important than even that is XFCE's system D compatibility, I guess, is very far behind almost all the other desktops. And as far as the desktop maintaining, they of course are just as good as the other ones, but the ones considered was GNOME, KDE, LXDE, XFCE, Cinnamon, and Mate. And of that group, there was a good desktop maintenance team for GNOME, KDE, XFCE, and Mate. And but yeah, apparently their systemd support or integration or upgrading is so far behind that was really the killer, the decision maker, to go back to GNOME, because GNOME's basically leading the pack in all those features.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting that it would come down, like it's that fine a detail that it would come down to.
It's
pretty interesting.
And the only thing I can think of that would potentially make it that high of a priority is because of the lower frequency for releases that Debian does versus any other distro. So whatever they pick now basically has to work for a year plus, versus if you had another distro, well, in 3 months or 6 months, when they fix whatever isn't working, the new spin that comes out fixes it, and it's not that big of a deal. So the long-term stability or the necessity of it being the best that it can be today, not so much the best it could be in 6 months, might weigh a little bit more with the Debian team.
That's cool, though. This isn't to say that they're not going to support XFCE. It's just to say
no.
the default is GNOME.
That is correct. Yeah, all the spins will still be available. You can still install whatever desktop you want. It's just if you don't pick, your default's going to be GNOME again come the next release.
When is the next release?
I did not look it up. I don't know.
Sorry, didn't think I was putting you on the spot.
It's fine.
Cool.
But
that's interesting information.
Yeah. But I don't know. I like to keep an eye on what they're doing, considering a lot of the other distros obviously are based off of that, or at least that world. And as a proclaimed stable, system, at least for me as an end user who doesn't have the time to do that research, that weighs a little bit on my decision of maybe what I should be doing in the next so many months.
Yeah. I mean, you're only a user of a couple of systems, maybe it makes less of an impact to you. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it is interesting information, so everybody should check out the link. I did read part of the discussion. I didn't finish it. Walt obviously finished it. It was interesting to see them talk about it, and that it came down to what seemed like such small details, but they're very important details.
Yep.
Very, very important.
So I'm sure the discussion will continue, and the fans of each desktop will continue to voice their opinion, and maybe the next one will be reviewed yet again, but
sure,
at least for now.
But that's what makes it that's what makes it cool is that they're willing to keep talking about it and they're not making a hard, fast decision and saying, no, we will always be some window environment, no matter how bad or how good it is.
True.
They really are looking for what's the best at the time, which is the way
True.
they should do it. That's very cool. Cool. All right. So the last thing I wanted to talk about this week was I have continued to play with OpenStack. And I discovered quite a while ago that there was a different way to install it than what I did. So what I did was the Ubuntu team had put together a single box install of OpenStack. And it was cool, but it took, I would say, 30 minutes to install on a Core i7 box with 16 gigs of RAM. I mean, it was pretty slow. So I was out looking for other stuff, and I ran across RedHat's installer, which is called RDO, RDO. And RDO does the same thing. It gives you the option to install it on a single box, or you can install it distributedly, however you want, depending on what flags you pass it. You can do that. Or you can do like I did, which is install it on the one box, and then go over to another box, install it, and say, hey, you're just a compute node, and here's the primary. And then it points everything back to the first one that you installed. So I had to switch to CentOS instead of Ubuntu, obviously, because it's CentOS, it's a Red Hat thing.
Red Hat.
It works great on CentOS. It works great on Fedora as far as I've seen. Haven't seen anybody complain about it. There's some minor things, because it's still new. So there's some minor tweaks and stuff like that you want to do after you've installed it. But the big advantage that I found over the OpenStack install I did with the Ubuntu one, which they may have fixed by now, but they hadn't the last time I checked, was that when I reboot the box, I don't have to go in and manually start everything.
That's convenient.
So the whole thing, basically is just, it's much easier to use. It's much easier to install. It's still installing all the same user interface. It looks exactly the same once you get it installed because it's OpenStack, so it just looks like OpenStack.
Right.
And so once you get it installed, but it's the install that's so much easier to do, because you install an RPM and then you run a command and then it installs all the other RPMs based on the flag that you passed it. And it does all that, downloads them all and puts them, installs them and then runs configuration scripts after the fact. If you want to, there are config files that you can change to say different parts are in different parts. Different parts are in different parts of the environment. So if you want to split off file sharing, their equivalent of S3 data storage, file storage, you can split that off onto another box, or you can tell it, hey, it's over here, and then it'll store the stuff there. But OpenStack is it's really impressive at how fast it's moving. It supports almost anything as a file store now, as the back end. So you do the front end stuff with web calls, and it's all REST API, but the back ends before used to have to be NTFS, or I'm sorry, not NTFS, NFS.
No.
NFS or just raw file disk, right? So it's cool, and it's very impressive at how quickly this is going. And I'm seeing customers start to take interest in it because it's open source and they're not tied to a vendor. Red Hat they're continuing to shoot themselves in the foot with this. They keep charging more and more and more for basically less and less and less, just the features that the top end enterprises would want. Or stuff like you and I have talked about it before. I want to be able to manage my server. Well, I can no longer run the traditional client because I have to have this management server that they want you to run, which, by the way, that management server is a beast.
Yeah.
And you almost end up having to run it on hardware itself, even though it's an ESX instance, a VMware server, but you have to pretty much have probably a 24 gig of RAM box because that thing needs like 12 or 16 gigs of RAM by itself.
Yep.
And it's like, holy smokes, you're going to consume half my RAM on this little box that I just have for home stuff.
Right.
Wow, that's just crazy. So playing with the OpenStack stuff gives you all the same functionality. It is harder to create images on right now. That's my one failing of OpenStack. Trying to figure out how to push an image to it. The cool thing is people like Turnkey Linux have images that'll work. You can use the AMI images from Amazon that they deploy to Amazon. Those work. And other places that produce VMware or virtualized images of their software usually have one that'll work on Amazon, which should work on OpenStack. They're cross-compatible.
Ah.
And if not, they're starting to do the OpenStack specific ones. But it's not all that different. So,
yeah, I keep looking. They had that we talked about before, the is it the T140 ThinkStation that would make a nice little home server, a little more powerful than those HPs that I'm running.
Yeah.
And every now and then, they just had one on sale the other day for like it was like $200. I was like, I might need to upgrade to that a little beefier hardware if I want to start playing with some of these newer toys. But I've been letting you forefront a little bit of that since you got the better box.
Yeah, and this is my old desktop that I turned into the OpenStack box, and I'm pretty much trying to get everything off of my ESXi box. And I'm down to, I bought that firewall, which we talked about a few weeks ago, which is rocking and it's working great. So I have that box set up. So that moved my firewall off.
The Pogos
my DHCP and the Pogos took all the DHCP DNS. So I think the only thing I have left to move is my GitLab box. I think that's it. Once I move that off, that's all that I have to have running on there. Now, I too, like you, was running a Plex server on my ESX box and tried to run some of the videos. So I got a new video camera before we went to Disney this spring, and the video camera takes just amazing video. I mean, it's HD, full HD. It's 1080p HD video. It is incredibly clear, incredibly nice video. And I put that onto the Plex box so that I could watch it on the TVs upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
Go upstairs and I go to watch it on the Plex box, and I spent the better part of an hour trying to figure out how to get it all to work.
Yeah.
I'm like, this wasn't this hard before. And it wasn't so much that it was getting it to work. Like, I could get the videos to start up. The problem is the box that I was running it on, like I had to keep restarting it because I kept changing the amount of RAM, I kept changing the number of CPUs, because I was having the same issue that you were with getting it to do that.
Yep.
And for me, and I'm like, it shouldn't have to transcode anything. This is a 1080p screen. It should be able to just suck it, play it, display it. But it didn't want to.
Yeah, there's the default, the high def is only 720, so you might have actually been trying to transcode it down to a lower res.
Oh, okay.
So if you didn't tweak any of those, that's one thing. And then whether it needs to be transcoded or not is still dependent upon what the devices can natively handle. So if the device doesn't natively handle, let's just say AVIs, it can only do MP4s, then even though it's a low-res image, it still has to transcode it to something that device can play back. So depending upon what the format was that your video camera used, yes, it can do native video, but maybe it was using AAC audio, and you can only do MP3 audio, so it still had to transcode it. So yeah, you run into this whole standard.
Yeah, I was playing that on my Blu-ray player, so I'll have to figure out what that is. I think I'm going to end up just having to buy a box just to run Plex on.
If I'm I'm still not sold on it. Like we were talking for, I love XFC, XBMC. I got
XBMC.
everything running really good, and it's kind of like, I don't know. My old
Yeah,
Apple TVs
XBMC.
are starting to show their age, so at whatever point I need to replace those will probably be forcing me to make more of a decision. But at this point, I can't justify, like you said, that's what I would have to do. I'd have to buy a fairly beefy system that could transcode all this video on the fly, and
Mhm.
I can't justify it right now when all my endpoint clients can actually just play it natively, off of a
Right.
Windows share. So.
Yep.
But
Yep.
like you, there's no way I would spend that kind of money either for something that would just be transcoding all day, because it would only be doing that when I'd be watching video. So I'd rather
Right.
buy a really beefy box and like you're doing, build me a nice OpenStack server and have it run on there. So when I need it, I got it. But the rest of the time, it could be doing more productive stuff.
Right. Lots of little things instead of just one big task.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, that's
All
cool.
right,
I mean,
Evan.
I'm glad you're playing with that because it's something I'm interested in and is on my side radar. So. Uh,
Yeah, I'll try to put some videos up and do some other stuff so that people can see what it looks like when it's running. It it looks like a web interface to a virtual machine. It looks nice, but yeah, there's lots to do with it yet. I have a lot to learn, but that's what makes it fun.
that's right.
So,
Or it makes you lose hair.
well, yeah. Mine are just going gray. They're just going to be totally, see, it's almost all gray now.
Yeah, I'm working on it.
All right, I think that does it for this week. Unless you got anything else to talk about.
Nope.
All right, so in conclusion, don't forget to follow us on the Twitters. We are at Linux Install on Twitter. You can check out our super cool community over on Google Plus at plus.google.com/plus Linux install net. And you can follow what Walt's doing over at geovac.com. And my other podcast and stuff is over at devopsmastery.com. And then don't forget that Greg and I are both speaking at Ohio Linux Fest in October on October 25th. The event actually goes the 24th, 25th, and I found out the 26th they're doing a diversity con on Sunday.
Oh wow.
So Friday is mostly if you want to learn about Linux, like learn to pass tests, that kind of learning. Then Saturday is the traditional Linux conference, the Linux Fest traditional conference, and then Sunday is a half-day diversity conference. So be sure to check all that stuff out over at OhioLinux.org. All the links and stuff will be in the show notes for this episode. So what should everybody go do, Walt?
Go get yourself some Linux and install it.
Bye, everybody.